it's Rachel and welcome back to Looking for Adventure Art, and today we have a really fun upcycled project. I love this one. It is really fun. It is the magnetic chalkboard using cookie sheets or serving trays or serving chargers. I absolutely love this. I think it's a great way to kind of refresh and give something a new purpose and a new look, especially if you don't tend to use them that often. The only thing that I want to hit home to you right now is that not all metal is magnetic. So make sure that if you are either going out to pick some of this stuff up at the Goodwill or at a store, make sure to put a magnet in your pocket just to check, because I found that the aluminum cookie sheets did not work. But if you happen to be around your house, you can always just test it with a magnet there. And if you happen to be new here, think about hitting that subscribe button down below. I'm not going to waste too much time getting into this, but I did want to let you know that I did go through some trial and error to kind of try and come up with the best possible solution. I don't always get it right on the first try, and I did try this originally doing just what it said, which was using the regular chalkboard paint. I did make sure, especially on the non-stick cookie sheet, which you will see I did not use a primer underneath. I wanted to see how it held up, but you do need to scuff all this up. I will talk about it in the tutorial, but basically my point is you have to use a primer with it, especially one that is compatible with metal. I did a few of these without the primer and they don't work. So now my cookie sheet is just unfortunately going to be holding all my really cute magnets. I'm going to teach you how to do all of these. Super easy. I love them, but definitely use the primer. To get started, the things you will need are a cookie sheet or a metal platter that is already naturally magnetic, some 60 grit or 80 grit sanding paper, a metal primer, some chalkboard paint, some painter's tape, some chalk, and a foam brush, E6000, and any of your favorite embellishments, from rhinestones to fabric flowers to beads, buttons, bottle caps, pendants, or you can use some of your favorite stamps and art making supplies and design your own fabric and then put it over a button form that you can get in the notions aisle. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your cookie sheet or your serving platter or whatever you decide to use and that 60 or 80 grit sandpaper, and you're going to start to rough up the surface. You want to make sure that if you have a cookie sheet with a nonstick coating that you completely get rid of that nonstick coating. And if you're just doing this on a regular piece of silver or a regular cookie sheet that does not have that, just make sure to scuff up the surface enough that you start to see some of the lines and ridges and it looks a little bit rough. You don't want it too rough because you do want a smooth surface in the end, but this is going to be a great surface to get the primer to adhere to. If it is nice and smooth and slick, it is not going to stick to it. Now that you have finished sanding your piece, you're going to want to get rid of all that metal residue because we do not want that in our paint or our primer. It is not going to be good to help with the adhesion. So make sure you wipe all that away. Be very careful. It is metal. And then you're going to want to take your painter's tape, if you decide to use it, and line the area around. This is going to give you a nice, crisp, and clean edge. I did not use this when painting my cookie sheet, and I didn't have a problem. I found that if I just take a wet paper towel and I carefully go around the edge, that I can get a clean line that way. So it's up to you. It depends on your piece if you feel like you need to use some blue painter's tape or not, but you can do it either way. I did it both ways. Now you're going to take your primer that is compatible with metal and you're going to want to make sure to follow the directions. So if you need to stir it gently until it's thoroughly mixed, or if you need to shake it, just make sure to do whatever the instructions say. And also make sure to get a brush that matches your primer as well. I'm using a foam brush for mine. It seemed to work just fine even though it wasn't in the instructions. So do as I say and not as I do. But you're just going to do a nice even layer across your piece where you want your chalkboard paint to go. I left those to dry for a few hours. I really wanted to make sure that the primer was set. So even though it felt dry after about an hour, I did let it sit for about 3 to 4 hours. And now I'm going to take my chalkboard paint and I'm going to do a nice, even, thin layer using my foam brush all the way across it. I don't want it to be too thick because I don't want any paint drips in it. You don't want an uneven surface because that would be no fun to write on, along with it possibly tearing up the paint. I'm also going to set that aside to dry, and on my directions it said to let it dry for an hour before doing the second coat, but I found that an hour was just not long enough, so I let it set for 2 to 3 hours, and that really seemed to make sure that the paint was dry and ready to have a second coat on it. Now that your first coat has completely dried, you can go in and do a second coat, and you can make it a little bit thicker, but you don't want a thick coat by any means. You do want to make sure that the paint is totally even with no drips, and then you're going to set this aside for 24 to 48 hours. I did do some of my chargers after 24 hours, and I found that waiting 48 hours was a little bit better and made sure that everything was really set and cured. While your piece is drying for the next 24 to 48 hours, you are not done. You get to make your own magnets, and I think that these are so much fun, and it adds a great personal touch. There are so many things that you can make using your own magnets. You can take some of the big crystals. I picked all this stuff up at Joann's, and then you can take the protective backing off of your magnet and adhere it to the crystal, because my magnets that I picked up at Joann's had a sticky side on one of them, which makes this process even easier. And I find that this is great for objects that have any kind of flat backing, like crystals or certain beads or paper or bottle caps or a whole bunch of other stuff. I found that for objects without a flat backing, that you're going to want to just use some E6000 and adhere that on. These are ones that have fabric backings, specifically felt type fabric backings, but this method is just as effective and just as strong, and you can do this for any of the fabric flowers, for other types of buttons, for pendants, and for felt characters. One of the things that I found that was super duper fun is if you have some of the flat flower petals. I have a bunch from Prima laying around. You can take 3 different sizes and you can use some E6000 to adhere them and flower layer them, and then add an itty bitty crystal in the center. These are really cute flower magnets. And then I just use some perfect pearls to finish off the edges. I use just a little bit of silver to give it some sparkle. You can also take some bottle caps, either repurposed or you can buy a set of them. They also have certain ones that are specifically made for this, but I have some of the really deep ones. And all I did was use a little round paper puncher, and I cut out some pattern paper, and then I put a 3D embellishment in, glued it in, which is a little bit of glossy accents. And after that was dry, I filled the entire thing all the way up with glossy accents, but you could also use, or ideally use, some ice resin. I let this set aside for about 24 hours to dry. It took some time for the glossy accents, but once it goes completely clear, it is set, and you can just add the magnet to the back, and they look so cool and so dimensional. And my favorite way to make your own magnets is by taking your own stamps and stamping them onto some patterned paper. I did this using Versamark, and I used a sentiment stamp and then some of my favorite stamps like steampunk shoes, and I have a cute video game controller and some other awesome stuff. And I am just going to then emboss that and then cut that out and stick that onto some heavyweight cardstock using my Tombow Multimatte adhesive. Once I have that stuck down onto the heavyweight cardstock, this is going to give it some strength and structure, so it's not going to bend immediately as you're using these magnets all the time. I'm going to fussy cut that out, and then you can just adhere that onto your magnet and you are done. You can also use some distress inks to really make something cool, or you could even use some gesso and some 3D gels, and you could make your own little mixed media magnets. I think that these magnets are so cute, and there's so many other options. They even had some really cute felt characters that you could pick up at Joann's, and you can really make it all customizable and all your own. You can have a matching theme and matching colors. I think that it's absolutely great. But once you're done making your magnets and your chalkboards are dry and it's been 48 hours, you're going to take that blue painter's tape, if you decide to do that, and you're going to carefully peel it off. I found that starting from the last piece of tape that I put down and working backwards was the most effective way to do it, and you want to take your time and go slow and really peel back on itself so you're not peeling any of the paint up. If you happen to find that some of the primer or paint had seeped underneath a little bit, you can be very careful and just take your nail and kind of scrape that off. It will come off easily, so you don't have to worry about that. You could also use a small blunt object, but just don't scratch the finish of the area where you don't want the paint. Before you can write on this chalkboard surface, you have to prep it and prime it first. So all you need to do is take chalk and rub it all over, really work it into the paint that is dry and kind of move it around. You want to make sure that you get a nice full coverage, and then take your hand and rub it in, and then you can just blow off the excess. You might want to do this a few times. I found that that worked best, but after that your surface is primed and ready to go to write what you want on it. Now, if you are not quite happy with your edges, one of the things that I found was really great to do is you could finish it off doing a nice beautiful line of some of the Nouveau crystal drops, or you could use your stickles, or you could put some cute little pearls around the edges. Any way that you want to embellish it, it will hide those imperfect edges if they're really a bother to you. Your chalkboards are all finished, but if you don't just want to write on them and use them in the kitchen or as just little notes, you can also add some hooks to them, whether it be regular hooks or what I'm using today are some dresser drawer pulls. And I just sanded off the two little pieces that were in the back to make them flat, and I just adhered them on with some epoxy. I made sure to wipe any of the excess epoxy away because you don't want to see that and you don't want it on your chalkboard. But these are so cute. You can hang your keys on it, you can hang jewelry on it, you can hang a lanyard on it, you can hang whatever you want on them, and they're so awesome. And that is it. Your magnetic chalkboards with the matching magnets are done. These are super cute and I absolutely love them. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I absolutely loved making these. It was a little tricky and I did run into some complications, but I think that these are really fun and versatile, and I'm going to continue to work on them. And I'm also going to run my own little experiment to see how well they hold up over time, especially with the primer versus without the primer on the silver, because I know it doesn't work on the chalkboard. But I really love these magnets, and you can always use these magnets on your refrigerator or anywhere else that's magnetic to hold your kids' photos, or maybe you got a great grade in school, or just some awesome stuff that you drew. I don't know, but I think that these magnets are awesome. Before I go, I do have one last question for you, and that is our question of the day. My question of the day for all of you is, what is one project that you thought was going to be super easy that ended up not going quite as planned? We all have some of those projects, and I'd love to hear what your stories are in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for all the daily updates. And if you happen to make this or anything else on my channel, feel free to email me or tag me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever kind of social media-ness that you guys do. Don't forget to check out my new website, and every day is a new adventure, so come back next time for a new adventure with us. You don't want to get this blah, 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 blah. To get rid of all that mess. And probably my favorite way to make, what's wrong with my speech sometimes? And turn them into something that you can,